Gurcharan, I'm struck by, when I read your book, by how much the Mahabharata is really not just about individuals and their dharma, but societal dharma, about societies and politics and war and justice in a society. And when I read about it and I think about what the world went through in the last year or two, this huge global financial crisis, this meltdown, I think there are very strong parallels which you have been able to bring in your book.
Yes, well, I was writing the book, and the global economy was absolutely falling at the same time. And so I couldn't help but note that there were things that the Mahabharata was concerned with and saying which might throw light on our situation and economic crisis. Of course, capitalism in one sense, historical sense, is something that came much later. But in another sense, capitalism and the market is about you and me going to the bazaar. And that going to the bazaar started when the first surplus occurred, after the agriculture was invented. And so it's nothing new. And that's why I find the Mahabharata much closer to our world than, say, Marxism. I find that the Mahabharata treats us with our flaws and with our strengths
human beings
as human beings. And so one of the things that struck me was that the world of Adam Smith, which he created brilliantly with the invisible hand, in fact was a bit optimistic. And this crisis brought home to me. Now, I'm an advocate of the market.
Market guy, yeah.
I'm called a market wala, and certainly leftists have much bigger, much worse abuses for me than that. But let me just say that what hit me was that Adam Smith and the classical economists, Ricardo and Malthus and others who came afterwards, none of them thought about the flaw in human beings. That flaw in human beings is that we are driven also by passions. Robert Schiller has brought this out.
So, I think in the new thinking called behavioral economics, it's all about, there's greed and there's fear and there's bubbles and all that.
And of course, Keynes was the first person who had talked about animal spirits. And then Schumpeter also dealt with it. So the Mahabharata's insight is very similar. It says that the world is Vishama, meaning it's uneven. And this unevenness of the world is created by the flaws of human beings. And the chief purveyor of Vishama in the world is Duryodhan, who with his greed and envy and so many flaws in him. Now, it's the same. What the Mahabharata hopes is that to even this world, to make it from Vishama to Avishama, you need Dharma. And Dharma in that sense is, one, self-restraint, but Dharma is also law. Law. And this is what Keynes talked about as regulation. So there are areas in this financial
So I think
crisis.
you're absolutely right. And I think you make a very important point, which is that, you have to take the concept of Dharma and what it means to create the law for society, and then look at our situation and use that and evolve the right balance of markets and regulation. I think that's what...
And we certainly must be very careful in India, having suffered through 40 years of license Raj, that we don't go overboard in the regulatory framework. It should be that light framework which allows animal spirits to move, but also stops when, they should catch, these laws should catch crooks. Sure. The one thing it's always occurred to me is that it's something that the Mahabharata also refers to, that it says that Dharma should, yes, provide the regulations of the state, and there should be there's a whole section on Dandaniti, meaning punishment and retributive justice, etc. But it also says, one point Yudhishthira says, that you also need to reward good behavior. Now, we never think of regulation as actually rewarding good behavior.
We only think of it in the sense of retributive justice, but not in a positive sense of good behavior.
Let me finally add one more thing, that the Mahabharata has an insight about this balance that we need to create. It's wonderful. At one point, there is a trader named Tuladra who is giving advice to a Brahmin. Now, that itself is very unique. Where a third grade trader giving a first grade Brahmin. But he's talking about living the life. He says, my life is that of a twig in a stream. And I move with the current. And I think that insight is really what the competitive markets tell you. That businessmen are at the mercy of competition, of their prices they can't set. Competition sets it. They can't, even suppliers, they can't dictate what price they'll pay to their suppliers. I mean, that notion of Tuladras in this wonderful, it's a story that Bhishma is telling Yudhishthira, and he's convincing Yudhishthira to go back and rule the kingdom and not go become a hermit. And he's trying to tell him that hermits also need to learn, and sometimes they should learn from businessmen. And this is a very interesting twist, which often happens in the epic, because it recognizes us as human beings. And to me, this was a very interesting insight that I don't think the Mahabharata had in mind competitive markets, but it did throw light on this aspect of our.
And I think the message is that you need to have the markets, but it's as much about rewarding the good as punishing the bad, and creating the sandbox in some sense, which allows these markets and these animal spirits to flourish.
Yeah. And I'm happy to see that India is maturing in that direction. I think whether it's SEBI or RBI, all these institutions who had no clue before have matured. The way we handled, for example, the Satyam crisis.
Role model, brilliant. Done extremely well. And yeah.
Anyway, we have to take another break, and we'll come back very soon.